Hi, I'm Gernot and I'll show you a new way for showing diagrams in AWS trainings. Let's start with an example. Let's assume you want to tell the students about how all the different possibilities, console, CLI, SDK and the other AWS services use an API endpoint. This is a static diagram. And maybe it would be better if you have a dynamic diagram. And that is the first step, that all these different backends or front ends, how do you call it, are using the SDK to go to an API endpoint. Let's have a deeper look at a call with the AWS CLI, the command line interface. The user calls something like AWS S3 API list bucket. This is a list bucket call. So what is the CLI doing with it? It uses the Boto 3 SDK to create a response with the call client list bucket. So an S3 client is created beforehand, and then the S3 list buckets call is made. Then this function is translated to a REST call to the API endpoint. And in the case of listing the buckets, it's just a get slash on the host S3 EU Central 1 Amazon AWS.com. Now the response comes from the API endpoint, and surprise, surprise, with S3 it's XML. But you will never see any XML because the SDK is translating this to JSON. And here you see the JSON buckets and with the name and creation dates. And this is exactly, if you have chosen output JSON, what the CLI is showing you. So this is the whole process for the calling of the SDK and the API endpoint. So how to achieve that? With two parts. A small program I have called steps interactive diagrams. And the other part is D2. This is a relatively new language for declarative diagramming, and you can create AWS diagrams just with text. And the idea on that point is that you create different text in different steps. You can download the program as a source, or you can go to the releases, where for each operation system you have binaries. So question is how to do that and how to control the number of frames you have. At first you install the program or download the source files. If you downloaded the source file, then you have an example library, and we will choose this example directory. And in that you have a task file. And in this task file, the program itself is called. Here we are stepping through the interact D2, and the D2 program itself is called with the watch parameter. And that means D2 watches for changes of the file. And while we are stepping through the files with our cursors, the step program will create different app D2 files. D2 will read these files and display them. So we can just start it with the task, and that will create a background process for D2 and our steps program. And now with the cursor keys, we will render the different blocks. How does this look in the browser? In the browser, you see the different blocks. And with the cursor keys, I can go in the up or right direction to see the next diagram of front and back. And the difference to a PowerPoint diagram is that you use the official logos, that you go into program your diagrams, and that you have it independent from the slides. Because if you have something like 10 steps in the slides, sometimes it can be time consuming to do a forward and rewind. So just check it out, try it out, do your own diagrams and give me a feedback. Have fun building.